Hi, everybody, and welcome to this latest edition of XR Remake. Today, we're going to take a look at a really cool virtual reality application called Human Anatomy VR. So, a few weeks ago, I posted a video and I recreated some of the interactions from this application. And today, I'm going to walk you through a tutorial to show you how I did it. So, join the two of us and we'll get started. So let's go ahead and go through the interaction so that you see what it looks like. So when users first come into the space, they spawn about here and they move up towards the model. And then they're given some instructions on the screen that tell them what to do. And so I'm going to activate the stages menu here and go through our stages, which are kind of like slides in a PowerPoint presentation. Users activate their handsets. And once they point at the model's highlighted, they press the trigger button and this skeleton appears. And then they're prompted on the skeleton where to point to. So they point to the sternum there, and they move it off to the side by using their trigger button. And then they move it back. And once that action's complete, they get the green check mark to say that they've completed step one. And then they go on through the tutorial, and they move several bones to the side. And then, using their B button, they press the B button to return the bones back to the skeleton, and then the tutorial is complete. And that's pretty much it. So we're going to prototype that out today. So for today's video, we're going to look at a few specific aspects of this prototype. We're going to look at the creation of this environment, and we're going to pay special attention to importing objects into ShapesXR. So you can see here we've got some OBJ files that we imported in. We've got this menu interface here, which was created in Figma, and we brought that in. And then you see we've got some JPEGs here that we brought in to use for textures and just to give our prototype a little bit of production design. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And then also interactions. How do we prototype interactions out in ShapesXR specifically for this particular prototype? So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we're starting with a rough skeleton of the room. Everything that you see here in this room was built just using basic shapes in ShapesXR. And then I went into my settings and I locked all just so that we can start building on these walls and not worry about moving things around. All right, so let's go ahead and start importing some PNGs and JPEGs into our environment to give it a little bit of production design. So to do that, I first upload my assets to the dashboard, which you can access at shapes.app. And from there, you can upload all different types of files. We support JPEGs, PNGs, OBJs, and then you can bring those elements into your prototype. So to access those files, I'm going to press my Shapes button on my non-dominant hand and come down here to my Assets library, and then down here to the Import menu. And everything I've uploaded to the web portal is going to be available here for me to bring into ShapesXR. Now, in some of our paid levels of ShapesXR, we do have a folder system so you can organize your files. So if you don't have that, anything you'll upload will just be generally located here. So for this, I have uploaded things to this Anatomy VR folder. So I'm going to click on that. And here I can find all my assets. So let's go ahead and bring in our wall PNG. So using my grip button, I'm just going to grab that and bring that in. And then I'm going to come over here and using our snap to surface feature, I'm going to move this close to the wall, and you'll see that line that appears between the PNG and the wall. And then as soon as that circle appears, I'm going to hit this button here, and that is my snap to surface button. So I click that, still holding it. You can see my object is now snapped to the surface. And then using my thumbstick, I'm going to move my thumbstick to the right, and you can see I can enlarge the object. So I'm going to go ahead and just sort of eyeball this here, make this about the size that we want. So, all right, that looks pretty good. Now I want to activate the gizmo so I can edit this and move it with precision. So using my trigger button while I'm in gizmo mode, I'm just going to select, and the gizmo is activated. So it's kind of hard to see, but this is one of our scale gizmo modes. So this little blue dot up here, this is a handle. So if I touch any of the handles on the gizmo and move my thumbstick to the left or right, you can see I can toggle through the different gizmo modes. So each gizmo mode does something different. So I want my classic gizmo, so I'm just going to toggle over there. This is classic. And then I can grab this little arrow here and I can move my object or my graphic along an axis. And then while I'm moving it, I'm going to press my duplication button, that button there that looks like a box with a plus sign in it. So I'm going to come over here, align this with the wall, hit the duplicate button. Now I move over, duplicate again. And again, I'm just eyeballing this for now. And there we've got a wall texture. All right, so let's do the same thing with the floor. I'm going to go back to my assets, and I'm going to choose this floor JPEG right here. Bring that in. Using my thumbstick, I'm going to enlarge it a little bit, snap it to the surface, move it into position, and then duplicate. And since we're prototyping, I'm not worrying about being perfect, but now you can see we're starting to add a little bit of design to our environment. All right, so let's go ahead and build out a little bit of a window ledge here. So I want to do this precisely. So I want it to be hanging over the edge a little bit, the same distance on both sides. So let's go ahead and build that out. So I'm going to access my Shapes button, Shapes icon. I'm going to come down here to my primitives. I'm going to choose this cube here, again, by using my grip button. Grab that, and then using the same Snap to Surface feature, I'm going to snap it to the surface. So now I know it's aligned with the world grid and aligned with the environment. And then now I want to edit this shape. So I want to go into my gizmo mode so I can edit. A real quick, easy way to get into your gizmo mode. This is your gizmo right here. So I could click on that to go into gizmo mode. Or if I'm in any other mode, all I have to do is hold down on the trigger button on my left hand. And you can see when I do that, the UI on my right hand changes. So this is just a quick and easy way to toggle into gizmo mode. Gizmo mode is kind of your default mode. So by holding down on my trigger button on my left hand, I'm holding it down, I'm now in gizmo mode. So using my trigger button now on my right hand, I'm going to select and it activates the gizmo. So for this is the gizmo I want. I want to be in the scale gizmo. And for now, I want both sides of this cube to be flush with the wall. So I'm going to use our snap to surface feature with the scale gizmo. So I'm going to pull this out here, bring it in. As soon as that circle appears, I hit my snap to surface button, and then I'm going to do the same on this side. All right, so now if you remember, I said I wanted a little bit of an overlap, but I want it to be overlapped exactly the same distance on both sides. So in this case, I'm going to toggle over to our classic gizmo. And these tiny colored cubes behind these arrows allow you to scale equidistance in both directions. So unlike the scale gizmo, which allows me to scale just one side, if I grab this cube here, you can see it scales out from the center. So this way I can ensure that things are scaling equidistance in both directions. So let's just do about that for our ledge. And now I want to shrink this cube down to make sort of our windowsill, our shelf. Now, if I use the scale gizmo now, or the classic gizmo now, you'll see we're no longer flush with the wall. So what I want to do, I'm going to hit my undo button here. I'm going to go back to scale gizmo. And now you can see the scale gizmo allows me to scale just in one direction. So that's good right there. And then let's go ahead and snap that to that surface, snap that to that surface. And then I want this same fitting at the top of the window as well. So I'm going to toggle now back over to our move gizmo. I'm going to grab this arrow here. And then you'll notice when I'm moving this along the line, if I try to return it back to its original position, do you see that white ring that's enlarging there? If I snap the white dot of my controller into that ring, you can see my object snaps back to its original position. So I'm going to snap it to the original position, hit my duplicate button, and then I'm going to bring this up here and snap it to that surface. Now, in the design of the actual VR game, there's some slats, kind of like some bars on the windows. So let's go ahead and build those out as well. All right, so to do that, I'm going to go back to our shapes. I'm going to choose this cylinder here. I'm going to snap it to the surface, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball this one. So I'm going to put that right about there. I'm going to hold down on my trigger button to go back over to the gizmo setting, and I'll just go ahead and use the classic gizmo for now. First of all, I want to make this much smaller. So I'm going to grab this single light blue cube here. And if you grab that cube, you'll see it scales and keeps all the proportions the same. So we want to make a bar here. That looks good. I'm going to toggle over to my scale gizmo and grab this one here and snap it to the surface. And then I'm going to grab this handle here and snap it to the top surface there. All right, so we're starting to build out some bars. I'm going to toggle over to the move gizmo and put that right about there. And so now I'm going to duplicate all these bars along the ledge here, so they're all the same distance apart. So I'm going to do a little trick for that. I'm going to come down here to my colors, and I'm going to choose orange just so that you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to choose this cube here, snap it to this surface. And then for now, I'm going to grab this arrow here on my cube, and I'm going to snap it there. And then I'm going to go to my scale gizmo and make a little space there. And I'm going to use this as a spacer so that I can make sure all my bars are the same distance apart as I'm moving them and duplicating them along the axis. So I'm going to select now by holding down on my trigger button. I'm going to select both objects. I'm going to toggle over to the Move gizmo, and I'm going to duplicate this one here. And then I'm going to use the Snap to Surface feature, duplicate, duplicate. You can see I'm using that orange cube as a spacer to make sure everything is the same distance apart. And now I can come in, select these, and I can get rid of them. All right, so that's looking pretty good. So I want this window fitting to be in all of the windows. So to select everything here, I'm going to first of all make sure I'm in gizmo mode. And again, I can hold down on my trigger button, or I can just come up here and select gizmo, and that ensures that I'm in gizmo mode. Now, while I'm in gizmo mode, I can move my right thumbstick to the left or right, and you can see the icon on my thumbstick changes. These are just different selection modes. So this one here that looks like a little squiggly worm, if I hold down on my trigger button, you see it kind of draws this line in the air. Anything that line touches gets selected. So you can see I can come in here and select every single thing like this, run it through, and select that way. Or I can go over to, let's do the sphere. And with the sphere, I can hold down and it draws a sphere, and anything that that sphere intersects gets selected. So it looks like we didn't lock down our floor yet, so it did select some elements of the floor. So let's go ahead and lock out our floor here. So I'm going to choose this lock icon here. Come in here, and I'm going to lock these elements as well. All right, so now if I go back to my gizmo mode, and I make sure that the circle is on my thumbstick there, I can select and just select that window fitting. All right, now since the edge of this selection is flush with the wall, I can come in here, snap to original position, duplicate, and then come over here and snap to this wall, duplicate, and then come over here and release. So now we've got the window setting in both of our windows. All right, looking good. All right, so for the next part of the prototype, we're going to bring in our skeleton, but we want to make sure that we're bringing in our skeleton at proper scale. This prototype requires that all the bones are separate so that we can manipulate them in the prototype, so we've got to bring in all the bones separately. So to do this, I'm going to go ahead and go over to a blank stage to show you how we can import things to make sure that we're bringing things in at the proper location and proper scale. So in this blank room, you'll see here we've got this red line and blue line. On our project. This is the center point of our world. So this is the 0, 0, 0, XYZ axis point. And in the 3D modeling software where the skeleton was built, all the bones were exported in relationship to this center point. So if I import things correctly, everything should be at the proper scale and in the proper location. So I'm going to hit the Shapes button on my non-dominant hand, go to my Assets library, come down here to my Imports, and we're already in our Anatomy VR folder. And you can see here, I've got all these bones here that are separate OBJs. So I've got the sternum, I've got the skull, the sacrum, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go ahead and choose an obvious bone that we all recognize. Let's do this rib cage here. And I can just, using my grip button, I can just grab the rib cage and bring it in. But then you'll notice if I come in and start bringing in other bones, like a kneecap, all these bones are not at the right scale, and I'm going to have to go in and rescale everything, and it's just going to be a disaster. So in order to make sure everything comes in at the proper scale, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that rib cage here, and instead of using my grip button, I'm going to use my trigger button, and I'm just going to select that object, and you'll see I'm given this preview over here, and it actually previews it in the world as well. And you can see over here with scale, I can scale this up and down and bring it in at any scale that I want. I want it as small as possible for this application, so I'm going to go ahead and just go down here to 0.1x, and then I'm going to hit spawn. And then it spawns that particular OBJ in my environment relative to the center point. So now if I go through these other bones, you'll see that when I click with the trigger button and loads, it previews where it should be located in the environment. So I come over here and go to spawn, and I just continue doing this with each one of the bones. And so let's go ahead and just bone by bone bring in our skeleton. All right, so we've got our skeleton all brought into the proper scale and the bones in the right place. So I'm going to go ahead and just select everything and group it for now. And then I'm going to grab it, and then I'm going to go back over using my thumbstick to stage 2. That's where we've built out our room. And you can see our skeleton's really huge compared to our room. So I'm going to go ahead and use my thumbstick, scale it down, and then let's come in here to the room and get him right about where I want, and then snap him to the floor. Let's go ahead and raise him up just a little bit. Then let's recolor those bones so that we can actually see them. All right, so in this prototype, there is a human body overlay that appears on top of the skeleton. So I'm going to go ahead and use one of our models that we have in ShapesXR. So I went ahead and set my color to white, additive, and brought my alpha channel way down. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to choose this guy here. And what I'm going to do when I bring this guy in is I'm going to use my grip button, and I'll explain why here in just a second. I'll bring him in and I'll snap him to the floor. And the reason I use my grip button to bring this person in is all of our people are at appropriate scale. So when you bring them in with your grip button, you do bring them in at what we call 1-to-1 scale. So no matter what size you're at, no matter how big or small your project is scaled up to or down to, when you bring a character in, they come in at proper human scale. So that's just a good rule of thumb. When you begin a project in ShapesXR, I always encourage people just bring in one of these people into your scene using your grip button to ensure that you're creating things at proper scale. And I'm actually going to bring that alpha channel down just a little bit more. And so I'm going to select this guy here, and I'm going to bring him into position and overlay him on top of the skeleton. So our skeleton's a little too small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to lock our humanoid character there. And then I can come in now, select my skeleton, and then I can scale the skeleton up to the proper scale. So that looks good right about there. And then move him over just a little bit. And then now I'm going to come in and select the hand and arms. And I'm just going to move those in so they match up with our human overlay just a little bit. And since, again, this is a prototype, I'm not going to worry about being perfect, but just get those in a good position. Okay, that looks pretty good. And it looks like our skeleton's just a little bit off still. So let me move him forward just a little bit. So the next thing we need is the menu that's going to appear here in the air that gives users instructions on how to walk through the tutorial. So the menu is this menu right here. We created this in Figma, and we created it at a specific resolution so that when we bring it into ShapesXR, it retains the proper scale. So we're going to use the same technique to bring in this menu that we used to bring in the skeleton. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to go to my shapes, my assets, come down here to import. We're still in our correct file, and then the file we want is the tutorial panel right here. So again, using my trigger finger, not my grip finger, I'm going to select it, and it opens up here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn on UI element. And you'll see here pixel density. I can do this drop-down menu here, and I have all these different options that I can choose from. So 0.5 meters equals 2,000 pixels, 1 meter equals 1,000 pixels, and so on and so forth. So I know that what we want is this 2 meters equals 500 pixels. So let's go ahead and click on that. And now when I use my grip button, pulling from this screen, I grab this menu and bring it to the air, and it's the proper scale. So I can lock this to the world grid and place it where I want. And now we have our menu. So this menu appears on every single stage, but instead of duplicating it on every single stage, I'm actually going to move it to our background layer. So in your stages menu, if you push up on your thumbstick to activate the stages menu, here are all our different stages, but underneath the stage that you're currently on, you'll see the word background. If I pull my thumbstick down, I activate the background layer. Anything I put on this layer appears on every single layer. So I want to move this menu from the top layer to here down to the background. So what I do is I start off on stage 2 and I pick up the menu. And while I'm holding it in my hand, I move down to the background layer. And then using that floating white ring right there, I align the white dot of my controller with that ring. It snaps back to its original position and releases. And now this menu, you can see, appears on every single stage. So in this particular prototype, we actually see the hand controllers just like you see in Shapes XR. So I've brought in one of our hand controller models just so that our developers will know how the interactions are supposed to work. So let's go ahead and start prototyping out these interactions. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this stage that we're currently on. So I'm going to activate the stages menu by pressing up on my thumbstick. And stage 13, I'm going to hit duplicate. So now stage 13 and 14, you can see, are exactly the same. And so I'm going to go over to stage 14 and make some changes. So when the sternum is selected, it highlights green. So I'm going to go to my colors, choose green, additive, and I'm going to bring my alpha channel all the way up and color that bone green. So now when I go back and forth between my slides, you can see that the bone is highlighted. So the bone is selected once users press their trigger button. So to make sure that my developer sees that, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to paint this button the same color, and that way we can clearly see that that's what happens when the bone is selected. And now we just need to build out that laser pointer. And then there's a blue dot here at the end. So I'm going to come in here and choose blue and use this sphere here as our cursor. So we'll just put that right there. And then in the final version of the tutorial, there is a text prompt that comes up that tells us what this bone is. So we'll build out that really quickly. All right, so for this next interaction, users move this bone over to the side. So let's go ahead and duplicate stage 13. So 13 and 14 are the same. And let's go to stage 14 and let's move this bone over. Now, when the bone moves over, there's a light impression of the bone left in its place. So I'm going to come in here, select this, snap to original position and duplicate, and then move the bone over here. Let's put it about right. Right there is probably good. And let's recolor these things. So I'm going to recolor this bone, that bone color, and then I'm going to come in here with my white. Let's just bring our alpha channel way down, maybe not quite that far, and leave an impression of that bone in its place. So back and forth between the stages, we see the bone moves. And then now we just need to bring over these elements as well. Go ahead and move that back a little bit. And then move our hand set. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of these elements here. And we're not going to use the blue ball on the second stage. So I'm going to grab that here and put that about right there. That'll serve our purposes now. And then we'll delete this ball. So when we go back and forth between our two stages, it works. All right, so let's now do the same treatment to these two hip bones here. All right, our prototype is starting to come together. So users move the bones off to the side. And then after they do that, this task is complete and there should be a green check mark that appears on the menu. So let's build that out really quickly. And then we'll just snap this to the surface here. And then let's go back through our prototype real quickly. User selects the bone, moves it to the side, does it with the two other bones. Check mark appears, action is complete. All right, that's it for this XR remake. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.